All right, here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Soul Tree podcast. I've got an exciting guest for you today that I've been waiting to talk to for a while. So it's a pretty big deal for me, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. The first piece that I want to ask here is if you like the show and you have been enjoying the content that we've been providing for you, then please subscribe either on YouTube or iTunes or Podbean, whatever format that you've been listening on. Also, this episode is brought to you by the Earth-Based Institute. Earth-Based Institute training nature-connected coaches and transformational guides. If you are interested in some of the concepts that you've learned from listening to these episodes, if you want to help people get in touch with their soul and dive deep into transformation and sustained long-term change, then check out Earth-Based Institute at earthbasedinstitute.org. And today I have Rob Meltzer. And Rob, just to give me a second here to introduce you, a very important person in my life, has played a role for me that has basically been one of the key pivot points to just the fact that I'm here today doing this podcast, that I care about this work, that I am a sober individual that is committed to recovery on an ongoing basis. And I actually have your bio here from your website that I'd just like to read briefly, if that's okay with you.
I don't even know what it says, Ryan.
Well, I'm going to read it. It's a paragraph. So, Rob Meltzer is the founder and primary educational consultant at Northlight Family Services. Rob enjoys helping families find the best path forward and supports them with compassion. He has evaluated and visited hundreds of schools and programs throughout the United States. He is a therapist, certified educational planner, and a full member in good standing of the Independent Educational Consultant Association. He is a certified Gestalt and Expressive therapist and has completed 400 hours of training with the Southwest Association of Gestalt and Expressive Studies. In the past, Rob has been a teacher, school principal, wilderness program director, therapist, university professor. He holds a BA in Natural Sciences from the University of Vermont and the Masters of Arts in Counseling Psychology from Prescott College. Welcome, Rob. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ryan. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so, just the point of the role that you've played for me, you helped when I was a struggling teenager with addiction, you helped me and my family find a solution. And, that's just one of the many things that you're able to do as that bio describes. So it's just an honor to have you here. And I've been wanting to share you with the world a little more. So
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to dive right into discussion because a lot of people know you, Rob, in the field of wilderness and transformation and coaching and therapy and so forth. But for those who don't, Rob plays a pivotal role in that community in a lot of different ways and understands guiding and transformation on a deep level. So the question that I wanted to start with is, what does it mean to be a wilderness guide or a transformational guide to you?
Ooh, you're not messing around, huh, Ryan? Just diving right in.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a wilderness guide? So where my mind goes, Ryan, you know my lobster metaphor, right?
Absolutely. I have that on my list of questions.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start there because I think that kind of speaks to everything I'm trying to get out when I have an individual or group out in the wilderness. So let me give the lobster metaphor real quickly.
Great.
The scientific accuracy of this, I'm not entirely sure. I read it somewhere, and so I took it as true, but the metaphor holds up. As I understand it, when James Lovelock, who is the guy who first came up with the idea of the Gaia principle, he went to, the Gaia principle is the idea that the earth itself is an organism, a single entity. It's an organism unto itself. And in order to prove that, one of the elements of an organism is that it has feedback loops, like the brain talks to the stomach, and the liver speaks with the rest of the body and the blood, and it's all integrated, and therefore there's feedback loops. And one of the feedback loops that James Lovelock demonstrated exists is that of temperature of the planet. This was like before global warming was a big thing, but who knew that one of the ways that the temperature on the planet is regulated is through the content of salt in the ocean. So the more salt in the ocean, the warmer the planet; the less salt in the ocean, the cooler the planet. And what regulates the content of salt in the ocean? Well, it's shellfish. So when the planet gets warmer, shellfish secrete less salt. And the opposite is true. If the planet gets cooler, they secrete more salt. So I like to ask people the question, how does the lobster know? How does the lobster know when it's supposed to secrete more salt? Does it do like a double-blind longitudinal study and go to the research? No, it just knows.
It just does.
It just knows from that place where it's connected to the bigger system of everything, and somewhere, somehow, those instructions are coming through. So to me, wilderness guiding is about helping the participant find those instructions. What are the instructions that are trying to come through from the deeper field, from the place where we're connected to all things, from the place where we're really participating in the ecology of our lives, of the planet, of our systems, and not just the ecology, but the family system, the political system. I believe everything exists within something. So what are we participating in, and how do we know how to participate? That's the essential question that I'm asking when I'm guiding somebody in the wilderness. So transformative wilderness experiences is about getting in touch with what I think of as like an underlying field where knowledge and information and instructions exist, where the field of synchronicity, where all things are connected. We're trying to tap into that and get a glimpse, just a glimpse, some guidance, some kind of a beacon that can give us some instructions on how to live our lives and what direction to go in and who and how to be.
That's great.
I'll pause there, Ryan. Is that kind of what you were looking for?
That's a wonderful answer. Yeah, there was a couple of things that came up for me in hearing you say that, and one was, it's interesting the distinction with humans versus other animals who can, or species who can access that knowing, and the difference seems to be that somehow humans have this weird way of becoming quote unquote disconnected.
Right.
Whereas like you talk about the lobster is just in harmony with what is, based on its own instinct, based on it, it just does what it does. And there's this weird consciousness that humans get trapped in where there's that separation layer that can happen. And we have to, like you said, go underneath that and tap into that source. One of the
things that I've been thinking about a lot, and I'm working right now with a man named Danny Racio, who's part of the Supportive Immersion Institute and the New Summit Academy and the Bridge for Young Adults in Costa Rica. Just a remarkable man, and he's helping. We're putting together some of a presentation for the Wilderness Therapy Symposium, and taking some of the concepts that I just said, talking about like, how does nature work, how do we do this, and then what about the human brain, and how does the human brain interface with that? What Danny's into, and what I'm learning a lot about, and what I think is really right on, is it's not just a layer of separation. I think there's many layers and many ways that we understand the world that are quite complex and different from other species, specifically that we have language and we have symbols. And so the way that we think and the way that we come the way that we are conscious has a lot to do with words and symbols. So the information that we get from that underlying field is almost translated. It comes to us, and I think in a different way than other species. And so, we are in the, that's why we're in the realm of metaphor and language and story when we're on the quest, because we need to take this information and make sense of it in a whole different way. So I don't think it's just the layers of separation. I think it's the layers of, I think that's a big part of it, getting our own conscious mind. And, we really do think we can figure out nature better than nature can figure out, itself. So we're busy in our frontal lobe thinking about this stuff rather. I love Theodore Rozak's question where he says, the question is not, what are we going to do about the environmental crisis? The question is, what is the environmental crisis going to do about us, right? That's the essential question. So he encourages us.
Oh, that's good.
Isn't that good? Yeah, we do a lot more listening to the instructions from the earth rather than trying to use our frontal lobe. So yes, a big part of it is shutting off all the thinking and the trying to figure it all out so that we can tap into it. But I think another big part of getting there is the language and symbol aspect of it and the translation. And this is just something that I'm just starting to think a lot about.
Yeah, so it's almost as if as humans we're navigating a different field altogether, a field that is it's less obvious what to do, and we have to decode that environment in order to live in an authentic way.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. So, back to this notion of how does the lobster know, what would be some indicators in the transformational process that you're secreting your salt, so to speak, that you're living in your truth?
Oh boy, my sense is it's like a plant growing towards the sun. You just know it. You just know when you're going in the right direction. I've been taking some classes with Thomas Hubel lately. I think he's just a master teacher. Really, I'm really enjoying listening to his stuff and taking the online classes. And he talks about just that sense of you just know when you get essential information, he calls it, when you're getting the drops from the future. That's what he calls them, these little drops that drop into your funnel and come into your nervous system and into your being, and you're open and you're getting these pearls of wisdom and these drops from the future. You just know it. There's
no question.
There's just no question.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, and everything starts to line up and everything starts to feel good and things start to fall into place in your life, and you just, you're on the path.
Yeah, you're in flow with literally your brain is in flow.
Yeah,
at some level.
Flow is, I think, one of the most important words.
Yeah. So, when being like in the quest you mentioned, there's some birds going crazy right above me.
That's great. Adds a lot of flavor to this.
You mentioned the quest, and the quest, what I've heard you say in the past, and probably Michael as well, but the quest is kind of, maybe you didn't use these exact words, but the archetypal story of transformation, the way that we map that, explicitly is through questing. And the quest is something that we naturally are inclined to do, but we set up these containers to go out into the wilderness to seek. And through that seeking, there's that process that you're talking about where you just start tapping into that knowing. Can you talk a little bit about questing and for those people out there that aren't sure what that is, and you don't have to explain all the details, but just what is the essence of that to you?
Just another small question, Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no, I don't think there's any one right answer. That's for sure.
There's so many ways I can get into talking about the quest. First of all, I want to say, at this point, I did my first quest in 92. I started apprenticing in Animas Valley Institute in 93. And, I've been at it for a long time and involved with the quest. And what it is and what it is to me has evolved tremendously in my life. And I guess I'll say, and I find myself today rehashing, rethinking all of it and giving myself some permission. And Michael and I have been thinking very seriously about what is the quest. And fun question for me right now, because to me it's all up for discussion.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, a lot of people think of the quest as maybe it's a Native American ceremony or a traditional ceremony or something that was given to them from a lineage or from a place. And I really that's not what it is for me. In my life, the way it's, I see the steps and stages of the quote quest as being absolutely fundamental, essential, and just in the very fabric of how the universe grows, how things evolve. If you study complex systems dynamics, if you look at the way that living organisms grow, if you look at evolution itself, if you look at cognitive development, anything that grows and evolves in a direction of greater organization, greater energization, more information, which if you look at the universe, you'll see that there's a lot of complex living dynamic systems that are growing into greater organization. That's very important. The universe is not decaying. The universe is not falling apart. It's actually weaving itself together into more complex dynamic forms. That's how everything that is dynamic grows. And in a linear, even fashion, things grow in leaps. Most things grow in leaps. So there's these leaps of transformation. We cross these thresholds in our lives, in our growth as organisms, both our cognitive systems, I believe, as well as our physical systems. We cross these thresholds of dynamic growth where we make these leaps. Sometimes they're subtle and they're small, and sometimes they're big, like when we go on a quest and we have a life transformative insight or something like that. So I just said a lot right there.
Yeah.
The reason that's so important is because I think at the very depth of the quest, we are helping people across these bifurcation points of their lives, these times when the old system, the old way of thinking, the old way of defining, the old way of knowing yourself is no longer working. There's a need for deeper, greater insight. There's a need for something that's going to help you understand and make sense of your life. At those moments, when things are falling apart, when there's some disequilibrium, when the old is not working for you anymore, that's the time. In the complex chemical system, there's the bifurcation point. This word that I'm using is the point of maximum energization and disequilibrium. It's the time when the system is either going to fall apart or it's going to leap into a higher level of functioning. And it's so important to understand that the system doesn't leap until it's at that maximum disequilibrium and energization.
The chaos.
The dissonance, the discomfort, that angst of it's not working, it's not making sense anymore. What the quest is called the lament. It's just not working, and there can be all sorts of things that go with that. And
Got it.
and so, I think that bifurcation point is what we're after, at the very essence of the quest. And then there seems to be a step of severance, threshold, return, or ending in between, and emergence, dying, and rebirth, kind of a cycle. Where the old, like if you're looking at the mathematical system or the chemical system, you'll see that it literally explodes. It's done. And it reorganizes itself in a leap. And
you can't even trace it really. It just happens. So
yeah, if anybody wants to see it online, there's something called the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction, which
I
is
just need to pause you for 1 second. I'm going to start walking that way. I'm going to stay on, keep talking, but I'm having a hell of a hard time on my internet. So we've got everything you said, though, so keep going.
Okay. So, this guy, Ilya Prigogine, won the Nobel laureate prize for showing the mathematics behind this reaction and what happens at the bifurcation point. Oops, are you still there, Ryan? Can you hear
Yep.
me? Okay.
How am I doing? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Giving you this heavy scientific
Sorry.
stuff while you're moving around.
Yeah, go for it. You were just at an important point there.
Yeah, so this guy showed the mathematics behind the bifurcation point and really kind of proved mathematically how complex dynamic systems grow and evolve. And I think one of the cooler things is Jean Piaget grabbed onto Prigogine's work and related it to how we learn, and showed that we make these cognitive leaps. It's the theory of equilibration. He showed that we make these cognitive leaps at the times when we are, no longer make sense. So, I relate all these kind of things because when I look into nature itself, when I look into, the science of how things work in nature, I see that most systems have these spurts of growth, of transformation and of change. And so I think of the quest as unlocking that natural organic process. So the severance phase, first of all, I think severance is, it's just so essential to disconnect and let go. I think that, the severance phase is really taking stock of what has been happening. What are these feelings? Are you feeling this dissonance? Where is it coming? Feeling right into what's happening, so that you can kind of go beyond that, let go of that, and get into, the in-between space. So, one of the things when tell me I'm just kind of going with whatever is coming to mind.
Yeah, let me just pause you for a second. You just packed like a full 2 or 3 books into the last 2 or 3 minutes.
I did.
That was awesome, and I just wanted to just take a second to make sure I'm still with you and unpack that a little bit. Are you able to hear me okay? Because I'm not getting great feedback on my end.
What a beautiful background you got.
Okay, good. So a couple things. One important piece is about this leap that happens, and this leap is really something that happens at the maximum point of disequilibrium and the maximum point of energization, and that is when what you call the cognitive leap or an exponential growth period, where nature or humans or whatever evolves at a rapid rate into a higher level of expression or competency or whatever you would call it, but just it's a new level. It's more complex, it's more integrated, and more complete, and it's more informed. Am I with you so far?
Yeah, I think it's really instructive for people to understand the theory of equilibration. It's kind of Psych 101, what you would get in your psychology program, probably in grad school, but let's go over it because I think it's really important for guides to understand. So, equilibration is Piaget's theory of how we learn. Sometimes it's called constructivism, which I think is an important school of learning and teaching. And so there's, first of all, we got to understand that we all have a cognitive schema. We have a way that we make sense of the world.
Right.
When we take information from our surroundings, and when stuff is inputted into our senses, we then put it into our existing schema. We sort it and put it in, and so we take the information and we put it in how it's going to make sense to us. That's called assimilation. We are assimilating the data that's coming in, and we're making sense of it. And then we'll go on in life, and we'll keep assimilating the data, and then eventually we'll get some information that we can't assimilate. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. And we go, what do I do with this? I don't know what to do with this. This doesn't make sense. And you feel uncomfortable with it, and then your schema changes. The way that you make sense of the world changes so that you can fit that new information in. That's called accommodation.
Got it.
Right? So I think of really the quest is a pretty big accommodation. That's what we're going for. We're looking for something new to emerge in the cognitive schema to help the person make sense of their life in a new way. This is not the way that a lot of people would explain the quest, obviously. This is a more developmental, cognitive, scientific way of looking at the quest, but this is what comes to my mind. I think this is what's happening a lot for people. Plus what I want to get to, though, is also there's that sacred in between that I want to talk about. So there's the cognitive. Let me just tie up one point, that the big essential point that I want to make on this for people that might be guides is the importance of the dissonance, the importance of the discomfort. This is why fasting and darkness and aloneness is essential. It puts us into our discomfort. It puts us to our edge. It pushes us to a limit. And it's at those edges where these kind of leaps and aha moments come for us, right? So let me just make sure to get that point. So many people who are teachers or guides or parents or therapists are uncomfortable themselves with the discomfort and the dissonance, right? So we've got to find that careful balance of putting somebody into enough discomfort to make transformation, but not too much comfort.
Right.
I'm speaking to someone who had Lou Vaughn as a therapist, so you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Does it resonate? Do you know what I mean, Ryan? Have you had those kind of moments in the wilderness?
Absolutely. And I think that key point that you're making is you want to be uncomfortable enough so that you can change. And it's reminding me of Singinger's learning zone model. It's pretty simple, right? The three circles, the comfort zone, the learning zone, and the panic zone.
Right,
and
exactly.
My understanding is you want to stay right in that learning zone where you're just on the edge of almost a little too much discomfort.
Well, using my bifurcation metaphor, the complex system will either leap to the next level of functioning or explode and dissipate altogether at that bifurcation point. So you don't want to explode the system, you want to transform the system.
What that brings up for me is this notion of transformation is not really safe. Everybody wants to be safe these days.
That's right. In the world today, people are not calling me for transformation, they're calling me for safety.
Yeah.
It's hard sometimes. So that's really an essential point.
Yeah, the narrative seems, the cultural narrative, even in the field that I'm in of wilderness and guiding and so forth, there seems to be that edge of safety almost becoming at the forefront over the hero's journey, which is really what classically transformation is all about, entering into the unknown willingly and not knowing if you're going to make it, like literally not knowing.
Exactly.
So
You gotta, yeah, it's going into the scary, scary.
Yeah.
You're not willing to go into the scary, scary, unknown, and darker place where the discomfort and the dissonance is, you might not get the wisdom.
Yep. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't always want to go there.
Yeah, you and me, and I think everybody else. But
Yeah.
it's a certain amount of boldness to go on the quest. And I think once you initiate, that action, and you take that step and you start moving towards that, watch out, because I think it just kind of happens. There's forces beyond us which just make us keep transforming.
Yeah.
Not always a choice.
That's such a deep notion that you said, though. The system either explodes or it evolves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's incredible to think about that, even like visually, and realizing that moment, there's so much packed into that moment where the explosion or the, what did you call it? The adjustment or the
bifurcation point?
Well, the reason that we quest is certain A. There was, I don't remember, but anyways, it was the integration of the new information was what you were talking about. Yeah. So let's. Do you feel like you covered that, or are there more points on that?
Well, I just want to say that that was a very scientific kind of brain-based way of looking at the quest, which is fun for me and something that Michael and I have been discussing a lot. And I think also once you have made that leap and you've got some, new, I think of it almost like you've now made more connections in your brain. You've linked some things up. You've got a higher level of understanding and way of thinking, and it's, I think it's really important then to cement that, to bring it home. And so once that new stuff has emerged, I think that's a big part of the return. And Michael and I have been talking a lot about doing ritual to so that there's some kind of repetitive way of reinforcing the new understanding and the new learning. That seems to be a really important thing to do. But I do want to talk about the quest in more spiritual or traditional terms, and speak to the importance of finding threshold space in one's life. I think it's precious to be in between. So to me, a big goal is to get somebody to the in-between space. What I mean by that is, the severance phase of the quest is often talked about as the dying to the old self. And I think of that as, really getting the hooks out of whatever it is that's defining you, pulling you in your life. Let's get away from that for a while. What I would call your story. What you tell yourself right now is you and is important and is happening in your life. Everything that defines you and that makes you who you are from an external sense. Let's just unhook from it. Let's turn 180 degrees away from it, walk away from it just for a moment. And I often say that the depth of the experience that you will have in the threshold space is directly reciprocal to how much you let go, how much you sever.
Wow.
On a neurological level, I think of it as like not occupying your neurons with a bunch of stuff, so that your receptors, your nervous system, your receptors are available and open and ready to receive. That's one thing, just clearing the deck so you can get some new information.
Yeah, emptying your cup, so to speak, right?
Yeah, emptying the vessel. That's really what it is. And So because one way that I'll talk about the quest is we're looking for that essential part of you which is not your story, right? The part of you that is beyond your story, that whatever happened to you in your life, this is what's essential. And that's beyond space and time. We can use the word soul, we can use the word essence. There's so many ways that I can think of to describe it, and the ways I've heard people describe it. But, I like just saying we're looking for that which is more essential than what came through your story. And it can help you get in touch with that. And then, how often do we get to be between? How often do we get to not be defined? Most days of our lives, we're defined by the daily schedule, the things we're connected to, the relationships, the money, the things that we need to do to make our life function. And it's just precious to have time where we're not defined by that. And it's in those spaces that I think we get the real opportunity to listen deeply, get the instructions. So it's not just about the big bifurcation, it's also about the subtle little pieces of learning that we can get when we clear ourselves and when we open ourselves. So much wisdom is available for us in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you said the level of transformation is, or the power of the threshold is depending on how well you sever, I really felt that in that moment. Just there was a conveyance that came through for me around what you said, and realizing all the fear that holds me back in my life from going to that place, and unhooking. You talked about unhooking, and unhooking is scary. Unhooking from the way that life is, and the comfort and the security and the patterns and the relationships and the stories. It's all that stuff are like walls that I can build around myself to protect myself against the unknown and against pieces that would potentially threaten my survival, threaten my thriving. And it's so interesting that the very thing that would cause me to thrive is also the very thing that would also cause me a significant amount of distress and potentially threat.
Right. Yep. Very well said, Ryan. I want to make sure, though, I don't want to badmouth all of what you just said. That stuff is real, and we have to have a self that works in the world. And so we have to be involved with, our relationships and our daily lives and have those patterns and defenses, and we need to stay safe, and it needs to be functional. So I don't think the goal is to live a life where you're absent of those kind of things. I think the goal is to take time in your life from every once in a while, let go and check back in with a deeper field. And if there's angst and it's not working, let the feel into the discord, the dissonance, and let the transformation happen. We have to do this from time to time to readjust and realign and get back on track. But the goal isn't to just live in that realm. The goal is to touch into it from time to time. And then if we do that, the big challenge becomes actually having the courage to make the readjustments in your life based on the wisdom that you got in the wilderness.
Right.
We all know that's the hardest part.
Yeah, totally. I've been there.
Live in the world with the world's opinions. It's easy to live in solitude. It's the great man is It's easy in nature. It's easy in the world to live after the opinions of others. It's easy in solitude to live after your own. But the great man is he who can keep the perfect sweetness and independence of nature while in the midst of the crowd. The world has a harsh need to change you and define you, and it takes us a tremendous amount of courage. Just tremendous amount of courage and strength to bring it home and implement it.
The world has a harsh need to change you and to define you. That's a powerful statement.
That's a David White poem line, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, the piece that I want to make sure I'm hearing correctly is you don't want to just rip your life apart just for the sake of it, just over and over again. You don't want to live in that space where you're just constantly redefining yourself, and taking everything apart, because that's not a functional model. Is that correct? Am I getting that right?
In certain circles that I travel in, it seems like the pursuit of the spiritual is, to be always, in touch with the Godhead or something like that. And I see people that are almost, addicted to that spiritual pursuit. They want to live in that, land of the juicy, deep, profound spiritual. And I think there's a place for that. I mean, certain people, maybe, there's some need to have people just live in that realm. But for me, that's not the goal. The goal is not to live, in a different realm. I'm just fine living in this world with the wisdom that I've brought from the other world.
Got it. Yeah, that's another big statement. I'm fine living in this world, as long as I have that access point where I can bring wisdom in. I'm here. See, that's so opposite of some, like you said, some of the crowds that you've hung around, some of the crowds I've hung around, whether it be at Naropa or other places, where it's all about transcending this reality. It's all about going beyond and going beyond. And the more that I live and experience suffering and hope and joy and so forth, the more that I am starting to prefer what you're saying as a truth, because it seems to me that can turn into, for me, I'll just speak personally, it's to some sort of escapism or wishful thinking or fantasy world, where really, like, to take it to like almost a Jungian aspect of viewing the world, really finding that the integration of the shadow, the integration of the discomfort, the integration of the mundane day-to-day life seems to me to be essential to bearing any fruits whatsoever of spirit.
Yeah. Different spiritual paths. I don't know. I like to give permission to people to follow their own path. It's there's no right or wrong, I don't think, with it. My choice is to, the way of the quest is the path that I've chosen. It really is my spiritual path, and the way I see it is it's to live in this world in a deeply informed way from a place that is, where I think of it as continually dancing with the underlying field, so that the directions that I go are from that place of connection and synchronicity and wisdom. And I'm finding at this stage in my life, thank God, that the more I align, the more things. It's just what happens. It's like you just got to pay attention and follow the thread. But that's the path that I've chosen, is to live in this world while continually checking in with the underlying field. That's the way I think of it.
And it sounds like you do that with a lot of respect for whatever other people decide is true for them, whether it be to not do that or to just meditate and only focus on certain spiritual practices and ignore the world. But you're saying this is what works for me, basically.
Exactly. I have, the hot debate that I always have with Naropa students is, whether or not you should do meditation on your solo when you're out questing. And
oh, that's a debate, huh? Tell me more.
Yeah, because I don't think the goal on solo is to transcend, so if you're doing any kind of transcendent meditation, trying to, you know, go into the great one, I think the goal on the quest is to be, it's more of a get in touch with self direction. And I think people that there's a certain Eastern philosophy which is about transcendence and letting go of self, and the quest is very much about getting in touch with self. Lately, I've been talking about like every enclosed entity has an identity and a purpose, and it's important that that entity performs its purpose in the scheme of the bigger system. I do not want my liver to become one with my body and let go of its boundaries and meld with my heart. I would like my liver to stay my liver and perform the function of a liver in concert with all the other organisms of my body. Right? That's
Yep.
the think of the quest. The quest gives us the instructions on how to be part of the guy, part of the big organism that we're a part of. And it tells us what our role is to play, and it gives us those instructions. So
Right.
it's not selfish to dive into myself. If I'm going into that intersection, that place where I interface with all things in the in-between space, and I'm open to that leap of understanding, and I get those instructions, great. That is not selfish. That is not selfish at all. If you then take it home and live it, because then you're going to participate better. You're going to function better in the bigger picture of it all.
So you just said when you're in that place of transformation in the quest, you're the intermediary, or you're using yourself as a process of listening to the greater organism rather than becoming the greater organism. Is that?
I don't know what it is. I think of it almost like there's this great drawing that Carl Jung did. I wish I almost feel like I should find it and screen share it, but I don't know if I'll do that efficiently, so I won't. But it's this diagram of like the great sea of the collective conscious, and then there's these cones that come up out of the collective conscious, which are each individual self.
Okay.
And then Jung shows these layers of the psyche, and as you get down through the layers, there's the layer where you're connected to the great sea of collective consciousness. So that's the way I formulate it in my mind. I think of it as like there's layers, and then there's a place where the information from the great sea of collective consciousness comes up into the individual. This guy Progoff named it the cycloid place, and I often use that name, the cycloid place. I think of it as like that's like the filter, that's like the place where the information comes up. It's my visual on it. It's my own way of constructing, making sense of it. But I do think of it as like energy and information that comes from a deeper field.
Got it.
Up into the individual. And then, as it reaches our higher thinking and our frontal lobe, that's where we're translating it into our life story and our language and our symbols
and like you're doing right now, being able to teach it and articulate it and share that. But that is a sign, right? That's a sign that this information has been embodied in the flesh somehow. Like you're saying, it's come up. And you understand the processes of transformation, obviously to an extent, you've assimilated that information, and now you're saying, this is what it is. So you're bringing it up into that higher realm, on more of almost a grand scale as a teacher and instructor. And just to that point, it's an interesting, the personal transformation happens, and then if you're a guide or you're a teacher or something, then you have another piece, another job, and that's to figure out how to convey or share that experience in a way that allows those people to also attune to that information.
So one thing I want to say about EBI and the EBI quest and the way that Michael and I are guiding is, it's fun to talk about all the scientific stuff and the brain-based stuff, and Michael and I love that. When all is said and done, though, you don't really need to know it. You don't need to do anything. This is just an explanation of what is and what organically happens when you start opening yourself up. You just go through those steps of severance, threshold, return. This is what's going to happen. It just happens. I had the opportunity to guide a few weeks ago with Nancy Jane, with Naropa, and I will compliment Nancy Jane on her simple elegance as a guide, operating with the principle that less is more. That these principles are inherent, they're there, they're in the fabric of nature, and we just need to interface and unlock the principles and take a few steps, and it actually just kind of happens.
Nature does the rest.
We really, it's not about teaching this stuff, it's about doing it.
Got it. And there's a trust that you said just is, it will just happen.
You broke up a little bit there.
Next question is, I just said there's a trust that this process just is and that will just happen is what. Right. Is the cycloid what you call the soul?
That's a really interesting question. Kind of. Yes, in a way. The way I'm thinking about soul these days, and Ryan, I avoid that word because it's potent and people make up so many different meanings of it, and spiritual, it's controversial, so I just avoid the word. But the way I've been thinking about it lately, I got this from Almas, the Diamond Heart guy, and I'm sure I'm bastardizing it a little bit, but this is the way I'm thinking about it these days. So if there's water flowing through the river and there's some rocks and stuff on the bottom of the river, it's going to make a wave. I think of the water as the spirit. I think of the rocks and the dirt and the stuff on the bottom of the river as the body. And as the spirit flows through the body and the psyche, it makes a wave. And the wave is the soul.
Whoa.
Right?
That just blew my mind. Wow.
Yeah. And the reason I like it is because unlike some other teachers, I think soul is somewhat movable. You move some rocks around on the bottom of the river and you change the shape of the wave.
Right.
You take a circuit, you put a bullet through my head and, take out a section of my brain, and you're going to change me. I'll either die or if I live, I'm thinking of that guy, Nicolas Cage, the famous brain study where the guy, he had a railroad spike go up through his, right into his brain, changed his personality, but he lived. And I think if you change the fundamentals of the body and the brain, when the spirit wind flows through, spirit water in this case flows through, it's going to change. So I see soul as movable. I see it as changeable. Another metaphor that I use is the film strip. So there's the film, and the light shines through the films and projects onto a screen. So in that metaphor, the light is the spiritual energy. Film is like your body and your psyche, and what gets projected on the screen is your life. Mm-hmm. And so the film strip is like your soul. What the wind, this spiritual wind or spiritual light is going through. It's I love the Rumi poem. God picks up the reed flute world and blows. Each note is a need coming through one of us. Remember the wind breath where the remember the wind breath, remember the lips where the wind breath originated, and be your note. Just another metaphor of the wind flowing through the reed, which was a big Rumi thing. So the reed is like, you know, the body and the psyche. So that's the way I think of it. The wave, the film strip, the flute. There's some energy that's flowing. That's why I think the word flow is so important. We got to keep that spiritual energy, that life force flowing through us, and we need to keep the circuits and the pipes and the, you know, whatever. We need to keep it clean so it can flow through us and energize us. Anyway, I'm just throwing everything out at you, Ryan. Hopefully,
I love it. No, this has been extremely potent. Yeah, it sounds like soul to you isn't so much of an identity as a place where energy flows.
Well, no, I think it's identity. I think it, you know, I don't think of anything in this universe as static. It's all flowing all the time, and everything is flowing with everything else and trying to come into regulation so that it's functional, right? Every last thing. The atom has to stay, you know, closely regulated with its other parts so that it stays in balance. And I mean, everything, our emotional regulation, our body temperature, the level of oxygen on the planet, the distance from the sun, the way, everything in the universe is flowing and regulating and in concert with everything else. It is not static. So I don't think we can think of soul as a static. I think it's I think we can think of our identity as a static. I think it's
not fixed
in the flow.
Got it.
And I can't go with a definition of soul that doesn't have that, you know, doesn't allow for the flow and the movement of things to change.
Got it. That makes sense to me. So it's not so much that it's not an identity; it's just a fluidity. It's a flow.
Fluid identity, right? It can change and shift.
Got it.
Over time, but it's probably not going to change all that much.
Got it. Here's a good question to close with that might take a few minutes. You've been around for a while doing this work, you know, and I know you've learned from a ton of people. You've been to a ton of workshops. You've guided a ton of things, and you're in this process of this. You're constantly in this conversation at some level or another. This conversation of transformation. What are the biggest things that have changed for you since you were my age? Because I'm in my first 5-10 years, and I'm still in a very beginner's phase with all this. What are the major changes if you had to tell someone like me a few things that have impacted you, changed majorly, things to look out for ahead on the road? I know this is a lot to unpack, but just go with whatever resonates.
Sure. Well, what comes to mind to say, Ryan, is walking this path and raising a family is, you know, I think that, you know, as I think of myself at your age, and probably similar to you, working for Bill at Animas Valley Institute, you're working for Michael at Earth-Based Institute. You know, I wasn't yet married. I was carrying things and making things happen at ABI. It was an exciting time of my life, and I was deep in the spiritual pursuit. And you know, there came a time when the level of responsibility deepened exponentially. And I became a father and a provider. And when those hats came on and the level of responsibility increased so significantly, the challenge of walking my talk and living a life informed from soul became just so much harder. So many choices for the children. Living in living in the culture that we live in, and so it became a dance, and I feel like the pursuit of money has made it difficult. And I'm proud that I have, I think I'll close with, for me personally, on my first quest, the most intriguing part of the quest was a light that I saw in the north. And I was told to, find a name, and maybe that would be the thing that was most intriguing and fascinating on my quest. So I took on the name Northlight. And over the years, what it means to be the light in the north has evolved and changed. And I've had to, I think, adjust and deepen and find a way to turn it into a business so that I can provide for my family. So the challenges of being the light in the north have just deepened. But I think I found a way, I think I found a way to do it. And, can I talk personally about you for a second, Ryan?
So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can I just say the day that you, I think of the day that you landed in my office, that,
at 16, 15, 14, 15? I don't know.
15, and you were so smart and so full of it.
That's true.
And so lost, and your family so lost. And, I could be the light in the north for your family and help you find the trail in the colder, darker place of your life. What an honor for me to be able to do that. And so, it's the biggest challenge for me was to take it all and translate it into a way of truly being in the world that would serve 3 children, my wife, and help everybody benefit and grow from it. And I, for the most part, have pulled that off. But I think
I'd say so.
The challenges of work and family life are probably the things that have added the biggest challenge to it all.
What a great answer. And not one that I expected either. I thought you were going to say something about, personal transformation, and you brought in family and responsibility and reality. And that just was there's such a weight and a sobriety to that lands for me. And I feel like that was probably the best answer that you could have given. And also just to say that it is amazing that you figured that out for yourself, because I remember being totally lost, like you said, going through your office and then you kind of navigating me through different places, processes, people, relationships, that somehow you crafted insightful plans and well, not plans as much as pointed me in insightful directions that allowed me to struggle against myself in the most productive way possible, and come out on the other side of that with the assimilated information, as you mentioned earlier. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for doing that for so many people out there.
Thank you for showing up for yourself, Ryan. It's one thing to say, go that way. It takes some courage to actually go. That's all you.
Appreciate it.
So
you're a great guest. I love the amount of information that you're able to convey and the wisdom that you have. And
we just packed it in, Ryan. That was pretty good. Yeah.
That was a treat. So I'll post this up, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with you again. I'm going to stop recording here, and then I will just say goodbye to you real quick. Bye, everyone.